Good morning, everybody. Thanks for that introduction, Gregory, and pointing out my age. And so as I look across the audience, I see a few people from my generation, but it's not unusual for me to be up here talking in front of people that are much, much younger. So community. It's very important to surround ourselves with people with positive attitudes that can support us for our own health and well-being. So when Gregory first called me and said the topic's going to be community, I'm an architect. We design buildings. We're not used to talking about things esoteric like community. We're used to presenting very specific, detailed information. So this is going to be a lot of fun for me to talk about community. And the first thing that came to my mind when he mentioned it was a book titled Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. Has anybody ever read that book? Great. Within that story is a story about community, which is the Rosito, Pennsylvania community that was founded in the 1800s by Italian immigrants that came to this country and couldn't assimilate in what was early America. And so they created their own community that ultimately became named Roseto, which is the same name of the town they came from in Italy, which was formed around a quarry, a slate quarry, which is basically the same thing that they did in Italy. So it was something they knew, and it was people from their own hometown. And they created this community, and they thrived, and they built to a community of 2,000 people. And it wasn't until the 1950s that people started to notice something different. A physician who had a farm close to this town noticed nobody was dying early. It was the fountain of youth in this small town. What was happening? They looked at it, maybe it's their genetics from Italy. Maybe it's the food that they were eating because they were bringing food from Italy. What was happening? As they looked at it, they realized that they had adopted the same American bad habits that we always did. Cooking with lard, eating fatty meals, drinking, but not in excess. And so they started to research this town in the early 1960s to find out what is in the fountain of youth, what has created this. And they determined that it was their sense of community, that nobody there had to worry about losing their job, because if they did, or they got hurt and couldn't work, the other community members would fill in and pick up the slack for them. Nobody demonstrated their wealth. They ate fatty meals, but they also worked hard. They had daily communications with their community members so that they felt like they were a part of something. And so that's very important to human beings. It's at the core of what we are. There's very few people that live in the wilderness by themselves and don't go crazy. We've seen a lot of movies where people are on the beach and they're stranded and they go crazy. What's the greatest punishment you ever seen on TV? I've never been incarcerated, but usually when they drag someone away to solitary confinement, even though they're in a maximum security penitentiary where they may get shivved at any time, solitary confinement is the worst. So for me, my communities are my family, the Eichler community that I live in Orange, California. Has anybody heard of the Eichlers? A great little community where we do know each other and we look out for each other. We know what's happening. We know when there's unusual people in the neighborhood. There is a community park at the end of my street that is the most used park in the country, I think, per square footage. It's filled every single day. So I'm part of that community. I'm part of the Orange Junior Soccer Club community in my city of Orange, where I'm on the soccer field when I'm not practicing architecture. I'm part of the Orange County community. I'm part of the LA Galaxy community. I'm part of the Kentucky community, where I was born and raised and graduated from the University of Kentucky. I'm part of the United States. I'm proud to be an American. Sometimes that's challenging, but that's like your family. You love your family unconditionally, but sometimes they're challenging. You got to deal with that. And I'm also a fan of international soccer, National Premier League, Bundesliga, Champions League. Any soccer fans out here? Few, all right. Some I know. And there are other communities. Each of you are part of similar communities and different communities. In the introduction, I met Chris here in the front row. Chris, tell us what one of your communities is that you shared with me.
Oh, cars.
Cars.
Yeah. Anything with 4 wheels.
Anything with 4 wheels. He has a YouTube channel where he can talk about cars, something he's passionate about. And I imagine anytime Chris shows up somewhere and somebody is also passionate about cars, he's got immediate connection and he feels good. Any other types of communities anybody wants to share that would be interesting to share with the rest of the group? Holistic wellness and nutrition. Somebody else mentioned something back there. Boxing? Yeah. But who said that? All right, I'm going to stay away from you. Boxing. So if anybody's interested in a little boxing match, a little sparring, after this is over with, you can get there. But you see there, a socially cohesive community is protective. No heart disease. People were just dying of old age. No alcoholism. No drug addiction. There's, what else that they have there? They're just a very healthy, well-rounded community, even to this day. Now, that's not for everybody. One of the things is most of them have 3 generations living in one house. Now, some of you might not want to live past 56 if you had to live with 3 generations. So, I'm from Kentucky. I was born and raised there, and this is the image a lot of people conjure up when they think of Kentucky. And in fact, when I Googled Kentucky boy, this is what came up. And I would like to say that that is all stereotype and nothing like that exists, but every time I watch the news and there's some crazy person, say a 30-year-old man that ran off with his 14-year-old girlfriend and they're robbing banks, I'm sitting in my seat saying, please don't be from Kentucky, please don't be from Kentucky. From Kentucky. Kentucky bourbon. So I grew up in Kentucky, and in my early years, I lived in a small town called Hardinsburg, Kentucky. Very small, probably similar to Rosetto, very tight-knit community. At 5 and 6 years old, I was running the streets all day long, literally until the street lights came on. This was before social media, before phones, or at least cellular phones. And so my parents had no idea where I was. I could go downtown and I could go into a grocery store. I could go into the diner and I could grab whatever I wanted and they would just put it on my account. They knew who I was. They didn't have to ask me what account that was, and could run across the street and just walk in the neighbor's house and go sit down on the sofa and talk to somebody. And so we were always outside all day long because guess what? We only had 4 channels. The 3 networks and PBS. Some of you younger people don't know what that's like. There was no social media, nothing to look at. So we were outside with community members all the time. And so that was the great part about growing up in the 60s. As Gregory pointed out, I'm very old. And we got to socialize and we knew how to communicate with people and we had a lot of fun. As I got older in high school, moved to more of a suburban area, just sprawls of houses outside Lexington, Kentucky. And as high schoolers, we didn't have any place to go. And so we commandeered the grocery store parking lot, which was fairly empty on a weeknight or even a weekend night in the summer times when we as high school students had nothing to do, but we wanted to get together. And so we would hang out there, but the adjacent fast food place had the cops run us off because we were scaring away patrons. And there's hundreds of high schoolers hanging out in a parking lot with cars that they're squealing tires on and stuff like that. They ran us off, and so a bunch of us didn't have anything to do with ourselves, and we ended up in a friend's house. And we said, wouldn't it be a great idea if we took all these leftover fireworks that he had and played bottle rocket wars in the University of Kentucky football stadium? So we took our bottle rockets, split up into 2 teams as if nobody would notice, and started shooting bottle rockets back and forth at each other. Sooner or later, the cops came, really sooner. It was about 10 minutes of fun. The cops showed up with shotguns, and I was face down on the football field, and we were taken into custody by the campus police. And I thought, well, that's no big deal, campus police. But soon we were escorted down to juvenile hall in a cruiser that was a K9 cruiser. Cages and all. I was with my friend Mariano, who was his parents exiled from Cuba because they helped take over Fidel Castro's, or helped take over Cuba with Fidel Castro, but then they had to flee the country for other reasons. So, very spirited Cuban family. Mariano are riding there. We come into the parking lot, and Mariano's mother is standing right there at the front door, and he just starts mumbling to himself in Spanish very quickly. And I'm like, man, what's wrong with you? He's like, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh my God. And so we go about 50 yards down, find a parking spot. Before the car even comes to a stop, Mariano's door is pulled wide open. He's yanked out of the car by his mother. She gets on top of him, MMA style, and just starts beating him to death. It took 3 cops to get her off of him. And so, anyway, the point of the story is if you don't have any place to go as a community, bad things are going to happen, right? We see that. We see that with gangs. We see that with the Ku Klux Klan or Nazi Germany or ISIS. When people don't have a positive place to become a community, some bad things can happen. These guys knew the power of community. Both of these guys, if you don't know them, Howard Schultz, the founder of Starbucks, and on the right, Mark Barnett. Starbucks, they took advantage of the suburbs not having any place for people to come together. And a lot of people go to Starbucks, we talked about that earlier, to run their business or just to go. If you're somebody who's single or alone, you go there to be a part of a community, even though a small community. You may not even talk to the people there, but you're passively a part of that community by just sitting there. And so they understood the power of that, as well as giving somebody a daily treat for a very small price. And so a great business model when you build on a community. Mark Barnett, does anybody know who Mark Barnett is? A few hands. He is somebody who came to this country from England and was a nanny in Beverly Hills. And he got to connected with some people, and he ultimately ended up on a TV show called the Eco Challenge. That's a race in the wilderness. And he kept telling the producers, we need more of the story of these people. We need to have a story of these people, of how they communicate and work together during this race. And the producer said, no, this is an athletic competition. We don't need all that story stuff. And he said, no, you're wrong, because that's the most important part. That's what people want. And so he left that show and he created another show that you've probably all heard of, which is Survivor, which is all about community and the people, both the communities that they come from as well as the one they develop on the show. So again, another powerful example of how community can have a positive effect. And so what I'm really here today to talk about is how developers, architects, and people who want to give back to the community are doing that at the Orange County Great Park. You can see here that this is a map that contains a master plan of the Great Park. Originally, the Great Park was supposed to be a park, but it's such a large area of space and would require so much money, mostly taxpayers' money, to develop, that they started parceling it off to be able to provide at least some amenities, and you can see here the results of that. Has anybody been down the Great Park in the last 6 months? You've seen a tremendous amount of development that you can see there, and 5 Points is one of the developers of most of the residential communities down there. And they're not building any more California. The land here is not getting cheap. In fact, across the country, everybody already knows where the great places to live are, whether it's great weather, access to wilderness. And so people have found those spaces and pretty much developed around those spaces. So those spaces aren't getting any cheaper. So the one way to address that is to build densely, to build higher 2, 3, even 4-story homes, which is something never heard of 20, 30 years ago. And now they're doing that. You can see the residential community at the top there is a lot of homes, very densely packed, again, 3 and 4 stories. But what 5 Points has seen is that we have to build something here that is for the community. We're not giving them a space in their yard, but we're going to give them a space to come together as a community. So they're developing these parks that are 5, 8, 10 acres of land just for the community to come together and to be together. So you can see there they've themed those from the top, the Earth Park, the Art Park, the Air Park, and then the Water and Wellness Park. The Water and Wellness Park is one that my company, LPA Design Studios, worked on, and we'll share a little bit about that in a minute. And then the Ice Park, again, a project I'm here to talk about today. We named it the Ice Park, not 5 Points. And then below that is the Fire Park, which is the fire station for the for the Orange County Great Park. And so you can see here by these developments equally spread, they're open to anybody who has purchased a 5 Point home. 5 Points has also developed a lot of this sports parks that you see there, the sports fields, the stadium, as well as contributing to the ICE project as sponsors of the 2,500 seat arena. And so you can see the community that they're developing there is very powerful. The density is at the bottom screen is very high. But you see right here is the Water and Wellness Park, which is 8 acres of space, of all kinds of different space. Outdoor space, indoor, outdoor space, that they spent $26 million on. Typically, in a residential community, all the ones that I've lived in that have a community pool or clubhouse, it's very small. Maybe it takes up 2 or 3 units of space, and it's rarely used. This park, since opening at the beginning of the year, has been heavily used and well appreciated, as demonstrated on social media, where they just can't believe where they live. I can't believe this is something that was given to our community. And it's, as you can see from the top there, is a place where they do get together and they interact and they socialize and they feel bonded as a sense of community. The Anaheim ICE project is something very special to me, something I've been working on for a couple of years now. And it came to us out of nowhere. It came to us because of Henry and Susan Samueli. Henry Samueli was one of the founders of Broadcom, and he sold that out and made a lot of money. Instead of going away and enjoying the pleasures of the fruits of his labor, he has decided to turn around and find a way, set up a foundation and find a way to give back to the community, mostly Southern California, as far as I know. So they came to us and they said, we want to build a new community ICE facility, develop a nonprofit that will allow this project to be built and have an endowment so that the maintenance and operation is taken care of for the next 50 years. And at that point, we'll turn it over to the city of Irvine. And so here's something where there's no profit model. There's not anything that's going to come back to the Samuelis. They're only giving. We originally started this project and it was going to be 2 sheets of ice and with a master plan to go to 4 sheets of ice. When we got to design the building, said, well, let's see what the build out's going to look like so that we can make sure that it all fits when we build out the rest of it. And they felt like it was just such a great opportunity and a great amenity to Southern California and Southern California ice sports that they decided to build the whole thing. So the Samuelis are going to end up spending over $100 million to build this facility, which is 280,000 square feet in 4 sheets of ice. There's 3 NHL sheets of ice and 1 Olympic size facility or sheet of ice. The Olympic sheet of ice is just a little bit wider. It's more configured for figure skating and ice skating, and they only really play hockey on there for the Olympics. So that is something that they're giving back to them. And then at the same time, while we went to 4 sheets of ice, they decided that, you know what we really need to do is we need to make this the Ducks' new training facility. At the outset, we had small facilities for the Ducks, but we said we have to compete with the other NHL rinks or the other NHL teams, and they have state-of-the-art facilities, especially the new expansion teams. And so to compete for the top athletes, they have to have the top facilities. So they asked us to incorporate much more of a permanent Ducks training facility as part of this. And they knew that that would also draw the community in as well. The excitement for the Ducks team. There are 50 high school teams in Orange County. Who had any idea that there were 50 high school hockey teams in Orange County? I certainly didn't when we started this. 22 different leagues. So you ask, why would you build 4 sheets of ice in Southern California? Because there is a real need. The operating time on this facility is 5 a.m. to 2 a.m. So there's only 3 hours that this facility won't be in use. This is very different on purpose when we first started than a typical ice facility. most of you think of ice facilities as being in Canada, being in Russia, being in Minnesota. So you had to throw that in there for Gregory. But in cold climates. And typically what they do is they build a big box and they put sheets of ice in it, and that's it. So when the project came to us, they said, we want something more than that. We want something more than just a facility to practice ice skating or figure skating. So they talked about creating basically a community amenity. So on the outside of this, as you enter the building, along the 700-foot long lobby is an outdoor park, 75,000 square feet of park space. That's almost 2 acres for people to come and relax, even if they're not going into the facility, to hang out. There's a great lawn area. There's an outdoor amphitheater. There is a beach area where you can come with your laptop, access a web server and wireless internet, and sit under an umbrella and hang out. And guess what? If you get thirsty or you're hungry, you can go inside to the new sports bar that's being built inside of this facility. Again, you don't even have to step foot on ice. You can go in there and hang out in a 14,000 square foot lobby, again with internet access. So much like a local Starbucks, this is a giant, supersized version of a community space, both outdoor and indoor, that connects these 4 sheets of ice together. One of those sheets of ice is a 2,500 seat arena where concerts can take place, where they can have obviously ice hockey, figure skating competitions, but they can also have concerts. They can have rodeos, Cirque du Soleil. They can have flea markets, job fairs, exhibitions. You name it, pretty much anything you can do indoor, you can do in this facility and charge money for it and make that money. And that money goes back into the community because, again, this is ultimately going to be a city-owned facility. So the Anaheim Ice, which is currently where the Anaheim Ducks practice, has 750,000 walkthroughs per year. So it's anticipated that this will be double. 1.5 million people will walk through the front doors of this the first day and generate revenue in excess of $15 million. So when you're operating almost around the clock with people coming in playing, it's a great thing. But it's not just for sports teams or athletic teams that will come from all over the country to compete here. It's for the community to come in and just have recreational skating. They'll have sled hockey. They'll have curling. Everybody probably got to know curling at the Olympics this year. So a sport where you can drink and have fun. And so it's got something for everybody. And we've been very proud to be a part of it. You can see there the front. This is a view from the front. And it's basically 2 large refrigerators. You can see on the left is the 3 rinks, and then on the right is the big box that you see is the 2,500 seat arena. And so we have to treat those as refrigerators, basically, or almost like freezers. And it's got to be very precise in how you get the mechanical system right with the ice on the ground, so that when a bunch of people file into it, fog doesn't happen. So if you get that wrong, all the heat from the people will create a situation where fog will happen. You won't even be able to see the sheet of ice. So very precise. In the each sheet of ice, there's 11.5 miles of tubing that refrigerates that ice. And in the Olympic rink, there's over 13 miles. So there's a lot of very specific things that me as a Southern California architect didn't realize and have learned as part of this. We've teamed with design experts who have done ice facilities in Minnesota and other places that come around. There's even a hot shot crew that all they do is do the underlayment to the ice because it has to be so precise to get great ice. And so they come in, they do their thing, they leave, they have a big RV and an 18-wheeler like a rock band, and they just drive from city to city putting in sheets of ice. Cool. So, cool, yeah. And this is not the only facility that has captured that kind of business model. In Southern California, there is the Southern California Sports Complex, which is primarily a soccer field for 30 plus fields. There's one in Norco. where they charge $10 for parking. They have a restaurant there and make hundreds of thousands of dollars a day whenever they have a tournament event going there. There's one at Lancaster. Has anybody here been to Lancaster, California? Very few. Lancaster is in the middle of the desert, north of Los Angeles. You probably never would go there. The only reason I've been there is because they have a 30-field soccer complex. And when they built that, there weren't all these other complexes, and all these hotels, restaurants, malls popped up. Houses started popping up to support those facilities. So these kind of community facilities, in this case sports facilities, can really drive a lot of revenue to your community, which then gets put back in, obviously, to your own city. And this weekend, in fact, my soccer organization is running a soccer tournament, and we conservatively estimate that that brings about $250,000 of revenue to the city of Orange, just by buying gas, by buying food at restaurants, and so on and so forth. So it can be a very powerful thing from a financial standpoint, but the most important part is that it is developing communities where we're really lacking that. With the suburban sprawl, we really crave that, and this gives us an opportunity to come together as a community and have fun and get to know each other just like we are here today. So with that, I'm happy to take many questions.